Welcome to this session. I think we're going to have a really interesting session. I'm KK. I'm the CEO and Chief AI Officer at Data Hat AI. It's called Data Hat because I'm always seen with the hat. And I'm going to be your moderator. Now, if you did a Google search right now and you asked how many AI projects are successful, what you'd find is it says 88% to 90% are failures, right? Now, all of us here, hopefully, at least me, will disagree, right? I've done hundreds of AI, data, machine learning projects, and I think the number is not that high. Why do people think that so many of these efforts fail? It's probably because we are not well prepared. We don't have the data in the right form. We don't have the trust. We're not sure exactly how we're going to use it, what's the outcome going to be, et cetera, et cetera. So now if you take that and you translate it to AI agents, right? AI agents are far more sophisticated, far more complex. What happens then? It's 90% today. What's it going to be tomorrow? So that's the topic we're going to talk about: AI agents, trust, accountability, responsible AI in the AI agent space. And very quickly, my background, I've been a chief data officer for many big companies, FTSE 20 companies, if you know Haleon, GSK Consumer Health. If you've used Sensodyne, et cetera, I was a CDO there. One Football before that, I see some familiar faces. And Farfetch before that, I see some more familiar faces. Maybe there are some from Zalando, Ericsson in North America, et cetera. Been there, done that a few times. And now we do agents and services around the agents. Before we get started, one thing I wanted to make clear is a lot of people have confusion about what is robotic process automation versus agentic AI, right? And I'm assuming some people know the answer, some probably have an idea, but I'll say it anyways. In my mind, robotic process automation was when you told the system what to do. There was a tree, there was a decision system. You take a certain direction when something comes up. With agents, you put in reasoning. What that does is you don't necessarily need to tell it where to go. It has the ability to reason, understand what's happening, and take the next step based on what's happening around it and using the tools that it already has. So big difference, and the biggest difference is on the responsible AI, accountability, trust, ethics part. Because now you're trusting that AI to take decisions, not necessarily according to what you have told it to do, right? So, without further ado, we have an amazing panel here. I'm just going to start with my friend David here, and I'm going to ask that they talk about three things. Of course, who you are, what's your role in your organization, etc. But also, give us an example of, what excites you about agentic AI. Give us an example of how you've used it. How have you put trust around it? We'll start with you and just go down the road.
Okay, thank you, AI. He's real.
Oh, I don't have my agent glasses on, otherwise you could say that.
You've been saying agents are amongst us all the time. So I'm David Reed. I'm the Chief Knowledge Officer at Data IQ. We're an information service that supports data and AI leaders to create an impact in their business through providing them with connections, insights, and expertise. At booths right outside, if that sounds interesting. Let me give you a really interesting example of agentic AI from Albania. So Albania has just appointed an agentic AI to the cabinet, and it's fully automated oversight of the procurement by government from vendors. And one of the reasons why they've done this is that whole process is so corrupt in Albania, and they want to introduce transparency and accountability and remove corrupt humans from the whole process. It's called Diella, which means sun. And they started off with citizen-focused bots to help people navigate through government services. But now they've gone, do you know what? There's a really big piece that we can deal with using this agent that we trust and we believe is going to be more objective, because how do you bribe an agent?
With extra power, extra GPUs. That's a brilliant example. Thank you, David. Dr. Joe.
Yes, sir. So I'm Dr. Joe Perez, Senior Systems Specialist and Team Leader at the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. After more than 30 years in state government, 25 of which was in a university setting, what excites me most about AI agents is their potential to act as a true lever, okay? They can amplify what we as humans can accomplish alone. And I say amplify rather than replace. I see AI as a tool that, when used properly and correctly, can help us focus on work that really matters, especially from my perspective. I think I may be the only one in government work. When your agency has been entrusted in serving the public, right, that is connecting with people, solving complex problems, making a difference in our communities, that kind of thing. As far as making decisions without a human input, when you work with a government agency, well, sometimes it seems as though we're not moving as quickly as private industry does. That's a fact. I be honest, I haven't seen much of this happening yet with us. We see the start of certain initiatives that include the use of what you were talking earlier, the RPA bots. Okay, they're starting to help handle things like initial benefits eligibility checks, triaging service requests for government agencies within DHHS, drafting messages for portal messages. But I remind my teams that in these early stages that we're in right now, we're not quite there yet, they're there to take the repetitive load off of our shoulders, not to take our place, even when they come to the point of making the decision, to the goal. Free up human capacity for nuanced capacity, for the nuanced things that only humans can go. For trust issue, okay, here's where you got to be careful. I see trust as a funny thing, right? It's fairly difficult to earn, almost maddeningly easy to lose, but nearly impossible to regain once you've lost it. Right, and that's why I think we need to tread lightly. Manage trust by making sure that you still have some kind of human factor in there. It's not totally lost. Every tool, every bot that gets deployed is subject to vigorous review. I think we need to insist on at least some bit of human oversight that could impact somebody's health. Right? We treat it as a lever, as a force multiplier, but not as a crutch that essentially we end up abdicating our own knowledge, our own privilege. Okay, if a decision feels like it's off, something doesn't look right, the human needs to be able to step in. It's not the technology that changes lives. It's what we choose to do with this amazing technology called Agentic AI.
I'm getting some lovely one-liners. Trust is a funny thing. I'm going to remember that one. How do you bribe an agent? We'll come back to that too.
He was my inspiration for that.
Anusha.
Yeah, hi all. I'm Anusha. I work for EY and I lead on data risk. So one of the fundamental building block for a successful AI transformation is having a strong data foundation. AI-ready data is my area of focus, and that's where I'm most passionate about, and I think more organizations need to start focusing on getting their data ready for AI. And what excites me about this transformation that we are currently experiencing is how much efficiency it's able to bring into our day-to-day life. And it's just phenomenal.
Amazing. Sam.
Yes, thank you very much, and thanks KK and everyone. So my name is Sam Khalil. I'm the co-founder for an AI engineering boutique based in Switzerland. And my background comes from the healthcare industry. So I've been doing 17 years in pharma from Merck, Johnson & Johnson, Novartis, and Novo Nordisk. And the reason I'm mentioning those names is that among all the discussions and the topics we're discussing today, we rarely focus on how can we actually use agentic AI or AI agents, not only for the benefits of good, for the benefits of developing drugs, finding cures for patients faster. But how do we do this in a regulated environment? This is the most complicated places, including banking and finance with healthcare. And how do you provide data and access to patients' data so that those agents can act on it? And one of the themes that we saw in every healthcare company is, and we see it now in every other industry as well, is who's the agent acting on behalf of? And whose authority that agent has in terms of access to the data? Are they allowed to see the data that I can see or that Anusha can see? How do we make those SOPs basically of governance? And in none of those companies is there a single SOP that mentions the word AI agent. We mention every title, every job in the organization, but we don't mention AI agents, but we say they're autonomous. So where is that fit basically? So we based ourselves in Switzerland, which is really the home of trust and really high quality, and we basically try to push this, that the engineering work that we do is around, can you build workflows of AI agents, but for a highly regulated environment, whether it's healthcare, finance, banking that we have in here. Yeah.
Amazing. Wow. I'm getting so much stuff to talk about. Let's go on to you, Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane Smith. I'm Chief Data and AI Officer at ThoughtSpot for EMEA. And what really excites me about this new era that we're stepping into of AI is we have the potential for an interface into the collective consciousness, the sort of distributed intelligence that we have. The potential for us to be able to tap into billions of interactions from conversations, from frameworks, from heuristics, and to be able to use that for the benefit of all of us. And the example I'll point to is to myself, the way that I use AI to, I imagine every single person here, we're all data people, I'm sure we're all using AI, and way beyond data people, but into the wider world and the millions of people that are using AI to tap into our human intelligence. I think it is going to raise many questions about how we think about ownership, copyright, how we think about trust, how we think about risk. It is a whole new world that's in front of us.
Yep, absolutely. Great points there. Sorry, I'm scribbling them as we go along. I was in LA recently, just a few weeks ago, and even today on the streets, when you talk to people, right, they're really worried about what happened with the editors' strikes and stuff, right? And the answer hasn't really been given. So it's a really good question as to what happens to the copyrights and certain companies that are scraping a lot of that information. I can create a new symphony in the style of Beethoven, and nobody can stop me, or much more recent people as well. So let's talk about trust for a second then. And maybe, since we had a couple of comments about trust, what kind of confidence do we actually need? Let's take the medical profession, right? Mm-hmm. So we have Sam and Dr. Joe, who are both from the medical side. What kind of confidence do us as common people need in that AI in order to be able to go to the GP or the practitioner, and that practitioner could be human, or if that human disappears and I have an agent that I'm talking to? What kind of confidence do we need, and how do you get to that point?
No, I think if I take that from a medical standpoint, what you need is really transparency in what the agents are accessing, transparency in the data that they have collected from, but also because in the medical field, or I come from the immunology, so I'm an immunologist that studies how the immune system works, and there's nothing more complicated than this and the neural pathway, basically. And there's not a black and white answer, never. You'll have thousands and thousands of relationships, of molecules, of cells that are interacting, and when you're trying to explain a scientific concept, you really have to understand also multiple connections of pathways that are happening in your body. So as long as whatever answer you're getting from an AI agent include this, whether it's a knowledge graph, whether it's a relationship and an explanation behind it, this is what will make us trust the answer, because it's going to come with references of where this information is coming from, why it picked up that relationship, and what's the level of that relationship? Because again, to the no black and white, it's a confidence level that you want to see. And I think it's even better than with humans, because that agent will say, there's an 80% confidence that these two molecules are interacting. A human will say, I think so. I think there's this interaction. And that's a completely different level of discussion you're having. And most of the work we've been doing within those pharma companies is around what we call data democratization. And data democratization is because I was sitting and many of my peers were sitting in front of a doctor. And the doctor is asking us, well, have you done a study on this type of patients? Because I saw a patient last week and I'd like to know if you had any patient in that clinical trial. As a human, I couldn't recall immediately if I had a patient of that age, that race, that basically lab value. But if I have an AI agent beside that I can interrogate and that pulls up the table, that shows me the actual data, my interactions with the physician and his interaction with the patient becomes much, much stronger. So the trust really comes from this knowledge of the interactions of the document or the tables that it's accessing, but also it's faster to get the information out for those patients.
And can I chip in? Thanks. That's interesting, the conversation with the doctor that you reference, and it's making me think, we all think, I trust the doctor, but do we? No. Is that really what it is? Do we trust the doctor? I think we do, but what we probably trust is the hospital, the medical equipment, the NHS, the certifications, the entire system around the doctor. And I think that's one of the things that we will rethink.
But just to challenge that slightly, Jane, if you're prescribed a drug, you know that to get any drug onto the market, it undergoes very rigorous testing. Big ethical framework, regulatory oversight, every prescription is tracked, reporting for any side effects happens. If you see a medical professional, you know that they have not just had to qualify, they have to constantly re-qualify. There is also a professional standards board, and if they do something wrong, whether deliberately or accidentally, they can lose their license to practice. And what I don't hear ever in the context of AI, and especially agentic AI, what are the sanctions? If it makes an error, possibly a grievous error, how are we going to sanction it? Are we going to shut it down? Or are we just going to say, oh, we're just going to tweak that model, it was a problem in the underlying data set, but it'll be fine going forward? Because that's the real question for me that builds confidence. Knowing that something can be pulled, can be sanctioned. We know that happens with humans. Why shouldn't it happen with AI and with agents?
So we have a person who works in a medical organization here with us. I want to hear you, and then I want to go back to some of the comments that were made here. Thoughts?
Well, again, it's all about trust, okay? Right? You trust the physician, or you trust the system surrounding the physician, right? And, again, getting back to mentioning earlier, if we just get back to the basics, assume you don't even know anything about agentic AI. Look at it from a pragmatic standpoint, right? What happens when trust is breached? It is difficult to regain that trust. What are the consequences for the breach of that trust? And what impression does that give to the people who are the patients, the consumers of these services? In my case, in health and human services, I'm not directly related to specific, the specific medical field, but in my case, it's social services. Okay, so flip it on its side. The social worker who goes to the house to check on the child that is in a terrible situation, right? Who consults with the agentic AI to help her or him to figure out what are the surrounding circumstances that I might have missed. What is some kind of trend that will help me to interact with this child, interact with the child's parents, interact with the caregiver, and so forth. That person makes an error, then that person is held accountable to it. It erodes the trust, but then when something is done and the person who's not competent is replaced with someone else who is, then that confidence of the family is rebuilt. Okay, so the trust, the responsibility, the repercussions for error. You can't fire a computer. You can pull the AI, as you said, right? And then, okay, let's figure out what the problem is. Oh my gosh, I need to change the model, whatever. But how much do you build the confidence of the people that are using these services and part of the key of that is for those that are going to be fixing things and those who set the policies around the fixing of the malfunctioning agent will need to know, okay, this is what's going to happen, these are the consequences, these are the steps that we're going to take to correct this issue, and we're going to be totally transparent about it. We're not going to be like don't worry about the guy behind the green curtain, like on Wizard of Oz, right? Don't pay attention to the guy behind the curtain. No, that is funny and it works good if you're watching TV, but not so much if it's your kid that's going to be receiving the care or not receiving the care, right? So total transparency in knowing these are the consequences, this is what's going to happen, this is our procedure, this is how we go about it. Having those frameworks in place helps to build the trust of the public that knows this is what we can expect, and therefore, okay, even when a mistake has been made, yeah, my trust has been restored, and we're good to go for the next time around.
So let's pull on that thread a little bit more. I've heard, we'll come to you guys next. So there's a bunch of people here that I know, and most of us are developing something, algorithms, analytics, etc., right? I've worked with some of you before. And now imagine you wrote a piece of software. You built an agent. We just heard a question about whose authority is that agent acting on, one question. We heard about accountability. We heard about transparency. Now, suppose that the agent, God forbid, does go wrong. And let's not talk healthcare. Let's say it's not as dangerous as that. Right? Let's say you have an agent and the agent goes wrong. The agent was built by one of us, was deployed by somebody like yourselves, right? And was actually acting on behalf of a person whose authority it has. So, since we're talking doctors, let's talk doctors. The North Carolina, Health Department.
Health and Human Services.
Health and Human Services. Yep, sorry. I'm an American, I still don't know all the health departments out there. Suppose they give my company, Data Hat AI, the task of building the agents. And they give Sam's company the task of the regulatory part of it, making sure that it's done right. And they give Jane's company the task of putting all of this together, or Anusha, or whoever, or David comes in to do. All 6 of us are part of that. And now something goes wrong. Do you go after the developer? Do you go after the person who deployed it? Do you go after Dr. Joe who actually sponsored all of this? How do you define the accountability? And how do we as developers and deployers and strategists protect against this happening? I know you guys haven't spoken for a bit, so please.
Yeah, I think we make analogies to many other sectors. So this is not the first time that we develop, for example, if you take any medical device that you have, someone that has a glucose meter because they have diabetes, that glucose meter had to go through significant validation, and basically we have software in it, we have hardware in it, and we have a human that's manipulating it. So you have processes in terms of medical devices, for example, services or products, and you have liability and legal frameworks. I was last week in Montreal in front of 150 lawyers. They were all debating the same arguments, but coming to the conclusion that this is something we do all the time. But the agent, is it a product or is it a service? Once you've defined this, and if your agent is a product, basically, the legal framework is behind it in terms of how far a consumer or a business can sue either the first layer or can continue in suing all the layers behind it. So I think we just need to think about agentic AI or the AI agents that we're building as an additional product that is provided either to a business or a consumer, and that changes your whole legal framework afterwards to which one is accountable. And no one should be able to be like hiding behind a curtain, like you said, and say, no, 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 I developed the software. If it killed the patient, it's not my fault. That is already part of the whole legal system that we have. And the way we like to call it is more that, think about AI agent as more the Iron Man suit. You still have Tony Stark inside of it. And so basically there should be always someone accountable in it. You've made an augmentation of that person's capabilities. You haven't fully replaced them, or at least not yet. And I don't believe we are in the stage yet of fully replacing humans' decisions. So when you have this augmentation, you still have this body inside of that suit. Someone is still making the decision.
Yeah, and I also believe that trust is a long-term game. I don't think we can earn the trust of users in next 1 year time.
Yeah.
How are organizations able to explain the steps that they take to make their data is bias-free? How are they taking steps to put controls and guardrails in place will earn that trust in a long-term basis rather than today, is what, I believe.
It's a brilliant point. Yeah, we were talking about, being able to do these things. I think we are very early days. We are still figuring a lot of these things out. But I will challenge you, Sam, and the rest of the panel to say, okay, remember what I said in the beginning. RPA versus agents. RPA, you tell it what it can do. Agents, you give it tools and you give it reasoning engines. Now, somebody gets into trouble. Let's stop talking about the health. Let's say we had a manufacturing issue happen because there was an agent that was doing certain things in manufacturing, and it fails. Do I go after the person who built it, or do I go after OpenAI? Because remember, OpenAI, Anthropic, and others are actually not even in the picture, but we're using them to do some of the reasoning, right? So maybe we start with you, Jane. What happens to the LLMs? What's the responsibility of the LLMs? And how can we make sure that they build the things that we need in order to have responsible agents, responsible AI in these cases? Because we haven't heard about the LLMs at all so far, right? But these agents take reasoning decisions based on some kind of an LLM, SLM, whatever it is.
I mean, I think the safety is too big a burden to place within the LLM. And I think the safety doesn't come from that. If we think about something like cars, you didn't get safer cars from rebuilding engines. Well, okay, to an extent we probably did. But what makes cars safe are traffic safety rules, seatbelt rules. It's the system around them. And I think this brings us to a point about regulation. And we sort of have this view of regulation that it stops innovation, it stops everything dead, it makes everything bureaucracy, and we get into the slog machine and we can't do anything. And I challenge that because we've talked about pharma a lot today. In the early 19th century, if you wanted to take some medication, that was quite a gamble because pharma was awash with snake oil salesmen, with charlatans. But in the 1930s, regulation started to come into pharma, mandatory testing in the 1960s. Regulation made pharma scale. It made it into the billion-dollar industry it is now. The same with banking. It was pretty risky to try and put some money into a bank in the early 1900s because you had no guarantee you'd get your money back, your deposit was safe. Again, it was regulation that guaranteed this. It was the various acts. So again, regulation meant that banking could scale. So I think you're right. To come back to your question, what burden should we place on the LLMs? I don't think that's the right place to focus. I think the right place to focus is the entire system around them.
Can I add to that, maybe just like a brief one to continue? The way we see LLMs also, and I think it's been seen now by many people, is like a utility that is being building up. It's like electricity or gas or water providing it. Not yet, but it will become to that point that if you shut down all companies that are providing LLM inference, yes, you can use maybe some open source or anything like that, but it's at the same level as cutting down the utilities. And if you continue on this analogy, it's like electricity right now. If your electricity provider decides overnight to jump it to 250 volts and no longer 220 volts, what happens to basically your electrical equipment in the house? Is your TV now that broke the responsibility of that electricity provider that just jumped to 250? Or is it the TV provider that didn't put a fail-safe so that the fuse was just breaking? And that's where we are at this point in time. And like when we build those AI agents, do we have enough fail-safe so that if that LLM decides to go rogue overnight, you have enough testing that is happening live that you're either having a fallback and switching to another LLM, or you're not. You're just blocking because you've tested it out. So I think it's also another analogy to use of like, as with utilities that we are relying on, either we regulate them, it's not like 25 companies that can provide us electricity, or we also have fail-safe in our products so that if something happens, it might happen, how do we control it?
Well, just to be the contrarian again, and apologies for that, I think there's an approach that simplifies all of that. And it's as the LLMs reach close to artificial general intelligence, and you know, some people think we're there, others think it's a little further down the road, you incorporate the model. You make the model a legal entity. You can't have an AGI that people worry about being smarter than a human that has fewer rights than a newborn baby, but also fewer obligations and less liability. And if it sounds fanciful, here in the UK we're celebrating 200 years of the railways. Railways were incorporated exactly to deal with the issues of liability. And it was mind-bending at the time that somehow this system could become a legal entity. But now we all accept the notion of an incorporated business. And yet, you know, it's a whole blend of things. Incorporate the model, and not only can you go after it for liability, you can tax it. And I think this is one of the other unspoken issues we've got to think about when we discuss the impact on human employment. Who's going to fund the necessary support for the population that might, and it's a might, get displaced?
Yeah.
Because it's certainly not going to be the companies that are developing the models, because they aren't that keen on taxation.
So David, you would incorporate the internet?
Yeah, let's go for it.
That would be an interesting topic to discuss, because from a access and open knowledge, basically, this is where you would go in terms of a bias potential as well. So I think this is the challenge of like incorporating everything. Maybe as a utility could be interesting, but incorporating something that will give you knowledge and could be biased by the government might be also another potential. So you need competition.
Yeah.
You need competition. You need an ability to pick and choose, because otherwise it's one
but
from
Sam,
the
the
government.
internet is not one thing, is it? The internet is a bundle of networks, whereas
I'm
an
just
LLM,
challenging you back there.
No, I think it's a good challenge.
This is exactly the conversation we wanted. Go
And
ahead.
I think
Anybody else
that's
want to
right.
come?
Like, you know, I fall back on the basics again. Basics of data governance and enterprise risk management. Controls by design and segregation of duty is a way forward to take that big leap on implementing AI agents at scale. Right now, the trend on AI agent is like, you know, we have an agent looking at one process, but very soon the trend is going to be orchestrated. The processes will be orchestrated by AI agents. So when that orchestration happens at the enterprise level, where does the segregation of duty start, and whose control mechanism, which team's control mechanism it falls under? So I'll go back to the basic on that one.
Makes sense. Any final thoughts on that topic? Dr. Joe?
Guardrails, responsibilities, transparency, and consistency. Again, back to your point, back to the basics. And then, you know, regardless of what that challenge might be, if that framework is in place, you have a way to deal with it, whether you're leaning towards the internet as one homogeneous piece of, well, I can't say that word. You know, what do you have, right? Regardless of what angle you take with it, have those frameworks in place, have those guardrails in place, and maintain that full transparency so that, you know, you're able to justify what direction are you taking.
Yeah, and I think back in the days when internet was designed, right? I think that the knowledge of internet and accessibility to internet was quite open to a specific group of people, but now the AI agent and the agentic world is much more accessible to a wider range of people, and that's why it's even more important to bring in controls right at the stage of design, so we don't leave it too long for things to go wrong and then bring controls in place.
Makes sense. And I really like that idea. ChatGPT, OpenAI, only makes $100 million so far, right? And they are raising billions and billions every time. So the ChatGPT tax, you heard it here, guys. ChatGPT tax, guys and girls. It's an inclusive term. But maybe there is something to it, right? When everybody starts using these things, somebody has to pay for it. Somebody has to pay for the new data centers, et cetera. And I don't think we've got an answer for it. I think about the governance part of it as well. Really important that we decide as a society whether we incorporate it, whether we limit it. The utilities example, right? I know that my electricity provider is going to make sure that things are grounded properly, right? That nobody is going to get an electric shock if they start working with the electricity. How do you make sure that these companies are able to do that so that all of us can actually build those solutions and get them out there? I know we're going to run out of time very soon. Do we have the ability to have audience questions here? Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a mic.
There's a mic. Any questions in the audience? One up here in the front. Stand up, Krish.
Hi, this is Krish. I'm an enterprise data architect at Mars. I worked with KK before at Farfetch. So I have a question to the panel that we have talked about accountability, but with AI agents, there is a lot of black box in terms of how it operates. So think about a pipeline which goes wrong. We know where to go and how to fix it. But if your AI agents goes wrong, how do you go about fixing it? That is another challenge that I see with the agents that we are building. And secondly, with the agents, we currently don't have a confidence factor. Like if it says that it's 80% or 90% or 50% true, then at least from the business point of view, we can tell them that this is okay, it's your choice whether you want to use it or not. But currently we don't have that mechanism. So taking these two things into account, how do you see this evolving?
Yeah, I think, you have a lot of observability that you can do for AI agents these days. I think there's probably, I don't know any black box in the AI agent's workflow. Because if you are literally looking at your prompt, your system, your tokens that are coming out, the tools that are being called, the input, output from those tools, everything is loggable. And that's how we do it in highly regulated environments, because you can actually know as a pipeline, that agent called which version of which LLM, what was the output, which tool, why did it call this tool, when did it go to another tool, what data did it pull. It's actually extremely observable. The problem is people don't apply this observability. So it's good old software design engineering and pipeline designing of the technology behind it, and then you will get that observability over time. And that's actually this morning in the keynote, it's about all this metadata that we're going to start to have of why they started to do this call, why they picked this tool. And this is how you improve constantly your agent. So we knew ML ops for many years. Agent ops is the next big thing in terms of you have to observe it. If you don't observe it, definitely it's a black box.
Other thoughts? So I'll add one more thing, Krish, which is you prepare for the unexpected. If you see what's been happening in these last 3 years, right? Can you imagine being back in 2021 and looking at where we are today? Could you imagine that I could ask those questions of an LLM and let an agent do all of these things by itself? I couldn't, right? And I'm a CDO who was supposed to be a top 100 CDO by none other than David here. Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
And the question is, we couldn't figure that out at that time. But what we could prepare for is the right kind of data, right what we do as an example is when we go in, we actually make a data map. We understand what that data is doing. We use agents to do that. And then when later on something goes wrong, you're able to go back and say, where did it go wrong, right? So in the interest of time, I'm going to stop that question there. I do have one last question for the panel. And if I could ask you in one sentence, maybe we start with Jane and work our way back. How do you think AI agents will change the future of work, of education, and of life itself?
Openness, everything's going to become a lot more open. We're going to be open in terms of the way that of inputs. I see a lot of people on LinkedIn saying if you want to protect your posts from algorithms, click here. I don't think we're going to do that. I think we're going to say, have my posts, I'll contribute. I think we're going to see more openness around accountability. We should be able to have and ask for fully auditable models, who contributes to them, what testing was done, what fail-safes were put in place. That's and then copyright I mentioned earlier, but I think the way that we think about ideas and who owns them, that's going to become a lot more open, and revenue and incentives will catch up to that.
Very cool. Sam?
I think it's going to empower humanity. It's going to level the playing field of where everyone has a stronger now ability to perform what they wish they could do, but it was just not available to them. So this empowerment will come. But unfortunately, on the flip side, if we're not careful, it's going to come to the rich countries, and it's still not going to empower everyone on the planet, because everyone wants their big data center, the electricity around it. So I think we have another opportunity in our humanity to potentially raise the whole planet instead of a few countries. Are we going to do it, or are we going to keep basically those agents just to a few countries?
Amazing. Yep.
Yeah, I think AI agent is really going to bring efficiency into workforce, and I believe as a mom, as a toddler, I can really see how much it has changed my day-to-day life. Copilot has just made my life so easy, and I think AI agents really have the potential to put young working women back into the workforce.
Lovely.
So, one sentence. For me, that's not easy. Yeah. I think it's important to remember that AI is a lever, whether you're talking about agentic AI or just generative AI or whatever. Use it as a lever rather than a crutch. Okay, something that's a lever becomes a force multiplier. Something that's a crutch is something that you become overly dependent upon. And the onus is on us to, as humans, we have the capacity. We cannot abdicate our capacity to a machine. We cannot lay the blame at anybody else. We must take personal responsibility, personal accountability, and use the brain power we have to understand that this power is to be stimulated, not stifled. It's an enhancement, not a replacement. It's a crutch, not a lever. Or it's a lever, not a crutch.
Yep.
Sorry, had it backwards.
And just to build on what you said there, Joe, I think we'll hit a boundary where as humans will go, I want my agency back. I'm not going to hand over fully to the machine. I don't like getting a lift that doesn't have buttons inside, right? I don't like the idea of the machine just going, oh yeah, I've done that task for you. I have to feel I have done something in my own way. So I think the adoption will hit that boundary where as humans we go, no, that's mine.
The line stops here, no further.
Exactly.
Yep.
Wow, what an amazing set of ideas there, guys. And if I just summarize the session, and I wrote so many things, I can't go through all of them, but agency, keeping agency, empowering humanity, I think absolutely critical. Transparency and accountability. How do you make sure that people know that you're talking to an agent, as an example, versus not talking to an agent? I know you didn't say it in so many words, but that's part of it. What are the consequences? Who prepares for those consequences, right? How do we sanction AI? My God. The ChatGPT tax, we have to think about that. But I think overall, what this gives me an idea of is, if you see the people on this panel from a completely different background, each of us from a different company, different ways of looking at it, but we all agree that agents are here to stay. They're going to change the way we do work, life, education, everything. And we are the ones who can help prepare for that better future. So with that, let's give the panel a big hand. Thank you.